Okay. So welcome to Blackpool School of Arts. This is the gallery right behind me. We've taught photography and various design subjects for about 80 years or so now. And photography has always been a kind of a stalwart of Blackpool and the Film College, of which Adrian came here in the mid-80s. And during that time, the college had invested with two other local colleges, in a Quantel Paintbox, which was incredibly expensive, which is why we shared it with some other courses. Now it seemed that Adrian was very interested in this and produced.
I thought you were given the paintbox, no? Or you had to pay something towards it?
I believe we had to pay something towards it, but I'm not entirely sure how much.
Probably a massive discount, I'm sure. But the college at that time as well was it was basically the. Can you hear me? Yeah, the college at that time there were two top colleges in the UK, and I think there was 1,600 applicants for 36 places in those days. So it was incredibly popular. So yeah, I'm sure that's why Quantel wanted Blackpool to be involved.
Yeah. I think what has been really interesting about this project is just the approach. It's just Adrian came to us looking for some information on the Quantel that we had. Unfortunately, we'd basically just scrapped it a couple of months before we got in contact, which is really unfortunate. However, it was really interesting seeing the work that Adrian had produced on this machine, and I just thought how incredibly fresh the work appeared. It didn't appear dated, and just seemed to fit very well with the ethos of our gallery, and the fact that Adrian is one of our alumni, and is seemingly quite successful alumni, which is a really good thing for our students to see, that you can grow up and you can come to college in Blackpool and you can make something of yourself, if you like.
Yeah, not that I've grown up yet. But yeah, so that's the background of the college and why it's significant, obviously for me as an ex-student, and why even Blackpool, though it may be famous for other things, and certainly in America nobody's really heard of Blackpool, but it's certainly a big part of photography. UK photographers, it's definitely a big part of that, the industry, if you want to call it that. Some really amazing people were trained at Blackpool. So yeah. So while I was there, there was the course, but there was this exhibition space didn't exist. When did when was that converted into an exhibition space?
So about 2008, it was turned from a library into this gallery. Right.
So I should explain to people, as Aaron said, I just contacted and said, hey, I used to work on a paintbox there, etc. It was the 40th anniversary of the introduction of the Quantel Paintbox, which you should Google, but basically every TV graphic, post-production, everyone assumes that in the 1980s, as you see from NFTs, etc., now that everything looked like a bad Sims video game, or it was Mario Brothers. But actually, there was a machine in '81 that did everything that Photoshop did, pretty much 9 years before Photoshop was introduced. So it really did revolutionize graphics, Photoshop, retouching kind of stuff, what was available, real time, etc. As you say, it was $250,000 at the time. So that I encourage people to go and see the Quantel Paintbox, because nobody knows this thing because it was so expensive and just owned by broadcasters or post-production companies. Nobody ever got to see it. And then, of course, in the 90s, even though they'd sold thousands of them, things like Photoshop and Adobe Premiere Pro and all those kind of PC-based software systems came out, and Quantel, that was the end of that, pretty much. So, so definitely look into that past, because it's something that people are getting really excited about rediscovering. It's probably time to go inside and have a look. So I was doing this, basically I was doing Photoshop before Photoshop existed. That's the easiest way to put it. But there was no name for it then. Look at that gorgeous sunny Blackpool.
Where would you like me to go, Adrian?
Well, so going back to it, I contacted you about and basically everything I left to you, because A, you know the space, and B, I wanted you to pick the images, etc. So I sent you all the images. I have about 70 different images still from my archive, and you decided to you know, pick which ones. So probably start at the other end. Do you think? Yeah, I would say some. Yeah, how about the?
In the cabinet?
Well, not the cabinets. 'Cause how about the one on the first image on the left now, as you're coming up to the. So, by the way, the video there does show David Hockney, which David Hockney went on the Quantel Paintbox in '87, and it was immediately hooked, and obviously still now is famous for his iPad drawings. He called them, again, there was no name for what was done. He called them colored glass drawings, because he said it's amazing, because literally you just paint onto a piece of glass, i.e. the monitor, the old TV screens. So this, obviously, if you, in conjunction, if you go onto either of our Instagrams, you'll see a good quality image of this. But really, what I would say is that even though this was a computer, what I was doing was just expressing myself. I was able to express myself in a way that I this was an image that I took myself, and then was playing around with textures, etc. And yeah, if you zoom in there, it's actually a combination of a Quantel Paintbox and actually an early color copy. So you get this texture, which actually looks kind of like pixels, really, but it was a color copy. And if you see on the left, luckily, completely luckily, that you can see all these kind of scan lines, because this was a TV graphics computer. So it was, for the UK, 625 lines. So the information was scanned out at 625 lines and luckily onto a 35mm slide, which is why these images are exactly now the same as when I produced them in I think that's 87, that one. Because most people would output those onto videotape, because it was a broadcast TV, etc. Computer. So I was kind of unique in various ways. Firstly, this computer just arrived in the second year of my college. Then secondly, I don't know if the music's a bit loud. Then secondly, I had all these ideas in my head that I couldn't do photographically. Like if you wanted to montage that image using photographic techniques, it would take you ages. It'd be cutting it out and look a mess. And thirdly, I didn't really want to go into the studio. So to me, to do an image like that, which would take 15 minutes on the Paintbox, as it would on Photoshop, it meant that I could go off and do something else more interesting instead. So my personality, the timing, and my creativity, I think, all luckily combined, which if any of those was off, I wouldn't have, if I was spending, like the rest of the students, all this time in the studio with film cameras and building sets and all that, you know, literally spend a week on one shot, I wouldn't have had time to spend on the Paintbox. And the Paintbox itself, because it was a TV computer, and because of those lines, people kind of poo-pooed it as not good enough quality because they were shooting on 10 by 8 inch transparencies. So, but to me, it was more about expressing the idea, getting that onto paper or film, than whether there was any quality to it. And to be honest with you, to me, I just saw that as a different kind of film grain. So, so yeah, that was an image that was used. I mean, I would do at the time I would go and photograph models at hair conventions and stuff like that because they were already made up and looked great. And that was shown as one of two images that was picked for the 1988 Art and Computers show at Cleveland Gallery, which is not in America. It sounds cool if it's in America, but actually it's cool. It was in the northeast of England, place, the original Cleveland, near Middlesbrough. So to be selected for two images for that show was something really special. So moving on to the next image. So this, so Quantel realized that there was definitely a photographic need. So they did what they called a graphic paintbox, which instead of inputting with a broadcast video and outputting, it could, in those days you'd have a drum scan and scan the images, and it worked at much higher resolution. So this was kind of playing around for a client. Obviously it was like a clothing company, and yeah, just making it look different and an arresting image, but trying to not be too, this is verging on kind of a bit corny because it's using an effect that Paintbox had, like a drag effect, to cut across his face, but you know, changing the color of the eyes subtly and stuff. But you'll also see from the hair as well, you're starting to get better cutouts. You know, the masks, it was called stencils instead of masks. So this is a really early image, 87. Quantel actually, so they did get the Paintbox into the colleges to try and encourage people on it, because even at the time, I was paid £350 an hour. So that's $500 an hour in 1987, because there weren't many people that could use this thing, even though it was user-friendly. So Quantel invited me down. This was before they released this graphic Paintbox, as it was called. Because I was a photographer, I took images, they played around with them, etc. And I could experiment on the computer down in Newbury in the UK. And that's the other thing, is that it was a UK company, which caused problems later just because obviously the biggest competitor eventually became Adobe in terms of this kind of photographic stuff. And they ended up with court cases, etc. that happened in England, then America, and whatever. So, but yeah, this was really interesting because it was a 1987. I set up the business in February '87. I started working on the Paintbox in, I suppose, January '86, and in '87 did this. This was actually my brother Simon Wilson. He used this for my corporate identity. I set up a company called Photon because it just seemed okay. It was photography and electronics, and Photon was the smallest unit of light, etc. So this was used as the image, just the face for the business card. So that was probably the first business card that was ever done using a Quantel and photographic manipulation. So maybe move to the next one. So this was so annoyingly. So this, for instance, when I was at college, the college was so well known that you would have Fuji would give film to all the students to try and encourage them to obviously get into using Fuji instead of Kodak. And they gave me free film to experiment with the Quantel. So that was great. And obviously I wanted to pay them back in some kind of way. So if you see that, it's kind of interesting. That was yeah. So you can say it's sort of a bit surreal with these parts of a face on a box. Now, what's interesting about that is, and it's a shame because I had lots of different 35mm and they would get lost over the years, or you'd enter them in a competition and in those days, you would send a slide and you wouldn't get it back. Now, one thing that was the issue for me was nobody knew what the Quantel could do. It's a bit like if you were the first person to show people Photoshop, it was a pain in the ass, to be honest, to go around and explain what Photoshop was. So actually that kind of grid of, what is it, like 9 different images, you can see how basically I've got one image, or pretty close to one image, and done all different effects. Pretty much like, I mean, that I haven't thought about it till now, but that's sort of like an Instagram filter grid, where you've kind of done these effects, or like a what's it called? Anyway, those effects where you have like the bunny ears and stuff. So that was really to show people what you could do with that. So it's a shame, and obviously at the bottom of the image there, you can see how the film has got fogged, which, to be honest with you, I kind of like, even though it's a fault, it's a film fault that shows. There was an amazing film, what they call a film recorder there, that could output the images onto 35mm. You can't even get those anymore. They can't work, etc. So to me, that texture and that idea that it's a crossover, literally, that shows there's elements of film, traditional film and photography, like the film box and the fogging, which obviously is unintentional, but then the digital aspect. Historically, as the bridge between old and new technology, I think it's a really interesting image, and maybe that's the reason you chose it, Aaron.
Yes, it is. Yeah. I think because there's still a bit of a connection to Fuji at the college, not as strong as it was. So it's, I mean, that's why it's nice to see this particular image. Could you explain the significance of? Can we see them here?
Oh yeah, look, there's some dirt on the film.
The vertical lines this time. Could you?
So because basically the Quantel, obviously, for any kind of TV, it's a horizontal format, 4:3, pretty much. So because I wanted to get the maximum resolution, which is still pretty low, what I had to do was I had to work on an image sideways. So you'll see on later images where it's actually the first image that you saw of the woman, the lines on that were going horizontal, but these are vertical. Now, I would literally have to work horizontally. Even if the image was vertical, I would have to work on the image sideways, so I would get the maximum resolution. Because I'd lose a lot of resolution if I, just had it on the screen and it was all the wasted area left and right. So that was something that I'd almost forgotten I did. And there's a video of me working for 3 hours on a project, and people are like, why don't you turn the monitor sideways? But the menu was always either on the top or the bottom, so that wouldn't have worked. So, even though it seems, and it was a really good user-friendly machine, there were definitely things that I had to do in an awkward way, whether it was, explaining what the machine did or even just working sideways, which, they're just workarounds, really. I mean, again, if you've got an idea you want to commit to paper in whatever way, you just find a way of doing it. So that was another constraint of that technology, which has created something. The Paintbox is interesting because it has what people call a digital fingerprint. So if you have something like a green and a purple, in between it has like 1 pixel line of yellow to help the transition visually between the two colors. So the Paintbox has that kind of quirkiness. Yeah, there you go. You see that kind of line there. It doesn't go from one thing to another. Now, you could sort of program that. So any of these images, you literally can't copy. It's impossible for several reasons. The Quantel, there's only 13 left, so you'd have to find a Paintbox first. If you copied that kind of edging that the Paintbox had, you could do it. But then there's the Honeywell output machine that this was done on doesn't exist anymore because you guys threw it away. So all those little fingerprints, the pixels, even the dirt of the film, means that there's no way, when people talk about provenance, whether something's genuine or whatever, there's lots of different elements to this which mean you couldn't copy this. I couldn't recreate it. So that's, to me, is really cool about this as well. It's unmistakable of its time, not just because of what I created, but the technology and all those different elements as well. So this next one, I don't know. There's some confusion as to whether that's what's the name? A famous model, Christy Turlington, or who's that meant to be? I can't remember anyway. So most of the images that I used were my images. That image was either one of my images that I took, or it looks familiar to, there's a supermodel, I forget her name now. And either somebody's copying with the makeup, etc. style, or it was out of a magazine or something. But I generally tended not to do that. But this was a series that I actually hadn't remembered. But there's a special interest group of computer graphics called SIGGRAPH, and Grant Taylor, who's so. When I worked on this, I knew that nobody else was really doing what I was doing for various reasons. As I say, they didn't want to, or the quality was bad, or whatever, and it was in Blackpool. But I'm in Blackpool, which is a coastal town in England, so I presume somebody in New York or San Francisco, where all this tech has been invented, is already doing something. I mean, I started doing this the same year as Pixar, so you just assume, well, there must be somebody doing this in America, because they always do it first in America, this kind of tech stuff. And so when I kind of came across I'll not bore you with a story, but basically it was only last March that I even remembered that I did all this stuff, and I had a box of everything in my mum's attic. So I, at the time, remember it being annoying, and there weren't really anyone there. There wasn't anyone doing what I was doing in the UK as far as I knew. But again, remember, there's no such thing as Google or the internet. This wouldn't be in a library or anything. So I contacted a guy called Grant Taylor, who wrote a history of digital art, and whose next book is going to be about what they call the Photoshop era, about digital manipulation. He wants to include this as basically heralding the beginning of that. And so he introduced me to somebody else as being the person that illustrated an image of mine was used in a famous SIGGRAPH article from 1988, which was does computer art still exist? So even back in 1988, everyone's discussing NFTs and the metaverse and all that kind of stuff now. But even in 1989, it was published, I think. People were saying, is there such a thing as computer art anymore, or digital art? I mean, even the phrase, is it digital art or computer art, was bandied around. So what I did was, and again, this is what I would learn at the college applied to what I took into the tech world. I literally just got the same portrait and put bits of what we call perspex, which is the stuff you use, basically the stuff you use for your shower cubicle. It's plastic that has a texture in it, and then hand colored it on the paintbox, and I obviously made a fuzzy of it on one side. Now what's interesting is if you see these images, they don't necessarily, as Aaron said before, conform to what you would expect from the 1980s. The 1980s was obviously partly because of MTV, and MTV used the paintbox and hip hop and graffiti and all these kind of movements, the design movements, was very bright pastel colors and ripped paper and all that kind of stuff. You don't really see any of that kind of stuff on my work. A lot of it's sort of more dark or whatever, because I grew up with punk and everything. I know it's more, there's a magazine called The Face, etc., an ID magazine. That was more my kind of style, really, that I was aiming for. So again, this is interesting and perhaps looks less dated because I didn't have any peers, and I wasn't trying to copy anyone, and I wasn't trying to follow any kind of fashion. I was just doing what I wanted to do, and if it was visually, it worked visually. There was that was what was important. So it is apparently a famous image, but I didn't know at the time. So that was just published in black and white. So it's great that people get to see that in color. And again, I think there are 5 versions of that. which I have as well. So I'm hoping, I'm talking with Bradford Museum, which is the National Media, it used to be the National Photography Museum, and I want to donate all this stuff to the museum, because it should really be in a museum rather than, you know, a box in my mum's attic, which it was a year ago. Obviously, it's something important historically, which I didn't realise, but obviously it's great. It is. But I've scanned everything, obviously. So, but the physical objects, all the invitations to the show and all that kind of stuff, it'd be great if that's in a museum, and then people can enjoy it and research it, whatever. So that's the importance of that one. So yeah, you can see that image. I'm trying to think, like, if you look at the makeup on that, that's really like a Blade Runner. Remember the blonde woman in Blade Runner that basically does all the backflips and tries to kill Harrison Ford using the leg scissor movement. I mean, that's so 80s, the makeup and the hair. But yeah, that was for a hairdresser. Now, in those days, if you're a photography student, your favorite people were hair salons who were like pushing boundaries, because they would literally get great looking models. They would make the hair and the styling look great. So you're already ahead. They would probably, you know, there's all these competitions and magazines that they would publish it in. They didn't pay anything, but you had a great looking image. So yeah, that was, back in those days, you would get an image in Vogue or whatever where it was, you wouldn't even be able to see the clothes that the model was wearing. So, you know, as much as I said I'm not trying to copy any style, you could get away with that darkness in that day. And I don't know, it's that kind of Edward Scissorhands chopped up image. And on the right, you see where the, not really intentionally, but you see where the sprocket is, because we had to process our own film, and you can see that's the sprocket that's got ripped. And actually, when I scanned it, it's got that weird digital artifact. But yeah, basically, that's kind of like the modern. I'm at a quandary as to how, you know, ultimately I wanted to get these images out there using technology. And if that quirk of modern technology scanning and the actual quality of your printer there, Aaron, is part of that, then it's kind of cool that you know, this is 86. So that's 36 years of technology that each has a bit of a signature of that technology, which is, you know, I could rescan it and take that away, but in some way it's kind of cool to have that in as well. Because I think images ultimately, like us being able to do this now, thanks to technology, you know, it should have just been frozen in time. You shouldn't just, we're not looking at these on a 35mm slide or whatever, we're doing it on Instagram. You're in Blackpool, I'm in Mexico, and everyone who's watching it's all over the place. You know, and that's something to be celebrated, isn't it, really?
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And I really like that idea that these images now contain a fingerprint of all the processes they've been through over that period of time.
Right. And you know, that's what it's about. It's about conveying an image to people that you hope they appreciate it. And more people that see it, you know, the better. Yeah.
This next image is quite an interesting one, isn't it? Because of the names and the titles you've put in it.
Yeah. So this, before I came up with Photon, because I mean, ultimately, if you're trying to work, I mean, this thing was expensive. I'd say to a client in the old days, you know, I need whatever, £2,000, £3,000 to do an image. But you don't know what it's going to look like. They don't know how it's going to be made. It's going to be output on a cruddy little 35mm that looks like you photographed it off your television at home. So I came up with Photon to make myself sound bigger, like it's a big corporation with a big fancy computer that could afford $250,000 or whatever. You know, and it's interesting because since then, if you obviously you know that my account's called Interior Photography on Instagram. My website's Interior Photography. I don't actually use my name anywhere. I just tend to you know, use a not a pseudonym but a business name. So this was a 1986, and again, maybe starting to put the portfolio together. So that's Ian Clark on the left, the guy who went to, he was in a graphics course. And then two of the models, in fact, you'd recognize the two models on the right, the middle and the right, are the same images or taken from the images from that Fuji spread, the one with the Fuji box. So basically, montage those together. I'm sure I didn't come up with that idea, but it was used in the Queen album, a famous Queen album where all the four members are together. It's different, but that was a famous thing that was actually done on that graphic paint box, the one with the split head. But yeah, it just says new photography now. Obviously, there was no. We all call it Photoshop now. If you saw that and you said to somebody, "How do you do that?" and you go, "Oh, well, it's Photoshopped," but there wasn't that word. It hadn't been. It was 5 years or 4 years before Photoshop was invented. And if I said, "Oh, you know, Paintbox," like all the people love watching this now and seeing it, I have to still explain what a Paintbox is. You know, I liken it to Google's search engine. Everyone knows what Google has a search engine, but no one's ever seen it. And that was equivalent to the Paintbox. So yeah, it was new photography, and because that's all I could think of is just new photography. And even though it seems a flippant thing, I wasn't saying it like, oh, new photography, like it was heralding what it did, which is basically everything on your phone and the filters and the, you know, all the fake news. The fact that people can just Photoshop stuff. I know fake news people, you know, Russians would, you know, Photoshop Lenin so he looked younger back in the day. But it was really, really complicated. You know, there's a team of retouchers in communist Russia doing all that stuff by hand. But we all know we can change our face to look like Clint Eastwood's just using an app or anything like that. So all that digital manipulation of an image, really, I know it sounds weird and I'm not meaning this in an arrogant way, but this was literally the start of all that stuff, because people obviously did it before on different computers, etc. But I literally have been told I was the first photographer to train on what they call a paint system, a digital paint system. And I was certainly the first photographer that all I did, well, I shot a few discos as well, but all I did pretty much was pushing this for 4 years before I gave up after banging my head against the wall. That's probably me on the left, actually, after 4 years. It's my face. So that's a really sort of significant image because of what it represents. And that you know, people have asked me what's it like to be the first photographer doing this. A, it was frustrating, like I say, and B, I didn't do it because it was the first. I just did it because it was interesting. And it was annoying that I couldn't even think of a name for it. So that's why that image is again quite important, and presumably why you picked it, Aaron.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they look great as well, these images. What's weird is the images that come out of the paint box, because I literally have got, I'm lucky enough, everything's sort of fallen together. I've got a working paint box. There's only 13 known in the world, and I've got one of them. And the input is basically, I think it's like 670 by 480 pixels. So that's the output of the paint box, the image, which is obviously less than a megabyte. It's tiny. But again, because that image then was projected onto a 35mm film, those lines and that 35mm film give it that extra texture and that sort of weird boost that means it's got like it's got a sharpness to it that it wouldn't have otherwise. So yeah, it's bizarre, really. And all this, by the way, it's been great for me to relearn all this stuff and remember it, because it does come back. You know, it's like listening to lyrics of a song you've not listened to for ages. Seeing these images brought it back, and reconnected with Ian, for instance. Yeah, it's it's bizarre because it's almost like an out-of-person experience, because literally this stuff just stayed in my mum's attic for 30 years, and thank God nobody threw out this box of stuff, because now we get to enjoy it. Okay, let's move on to the next one, shall we? So as much as we've just talked about the importance of all those different things, and it's not really a gimmicky thing, but it's something that obviously when you're putting together a show or talking about your work, you want people to relate to it and try and understand it or be drawn to it in some way that they can understand. So if I said, hey, I did like the first Photoshop in the world, firstly they'd think I was arrogant, which might be a bit, but you know, they'd think I was overstating it. Secondly, they'd say, well, it's not Photoshop, and then you'd say, well, it's a Paintbox, and they go, what the hell's that? So this is something that, obviously, everyone knows my humor who's watching this. So this was a friend, Duncan, sent me a postcard in '87 that was a sepia postcard of Star Trek. Just happened to be that, just, you know, he was, we went to college together, and he'd moved to London. You know, in those days, you'd send somebody a postcard explaining how you were doing. So basically, I hand-coloured it using a paint box and put my head on Captain Kirk, and then, you know, jokingly said season's greeting. That was my first ever business promo thing that I sent out to everybody. So really, and obviously, the text isn't hilarious, but it's meant to be ironic. So that's got all the elements of what would later become known as a meme. Now, a meme in itself, again, a lot of these things in digital history have lots of different meanings. You know, a meme could literally be, you know, there's one that's meant to be for the 1920s. It could be getting a Victorian scrapbook and cutting flowers out and putting different heads on bodies and making fairies out of whatever pictures that you've cut out. But certainly, getting a photographic image, changing it completely, and it's a photographic image of an iconic, like a socially iconic thing. I'm so glad Duncan didn't send me a postcard of like the A-Team or what's it called, that Knight Rider or something like that, which was popular at the time. Because obviously Star Trek, especially with William Shatner, you know, he's still famous. So, you know, it's kind of, it fits everything of a meme. And so we kind of said, well, is it the first meme? And Jerry Saltz posted it and offered $1,000, which I'd offered, to anyone who got something that matched, you know, the criteria of being digitally manipulated, photographed, etc. Before this. And nobody did. Doesn't mean that there isn't one. And then, you know, he posted it and I posted it. So it did, I mean, it didn't go viral, but it went online. So in theory, if nothing else, it's the meme that took the longest from being created to going online. Because again, I mean, forget the internet didn't exist. The JPEG didn't even exist when I made this. So, so it's a cool image and a fun image. It's probably not as historically important to me as the other ones, but in theory, it could be something, you know, that's relatably special and seemingly invaluable to people because people know what a meme is. So that's why we included that.
Okay,
and if anyone's got an earlier meme, I'm happy. By the way, this isn't all to show. I'm not trying to make out that I am the first, or if somebody comes up and says, well, you're the second. To me, what's interesting is, and Aaron, I mean, you can, I know I don't want to like blow my own trumpet here, but probably, but basically, I think even if I wasn't the first, if there was 20 other people doing what I was doing, I would be really happy with this work because I think it's really great looking work. You know, it's not just because it's a novelty that it's the first that makes it special. What do you think, Aaron?
I think the fact that it stood the test of time is testament to that. And certainly in this day and age, well, certainly at this point, certainly in the college that I work, there seems to be a very distinct move away from perfection within photography, and trying to just find those little nuanced kind of mistakes or problems in the media that you don't necessarily get in digital media.
Right. Yeah, even when we were at college, it was the same thing, that everyone was trying to do photorealistic airbrush work, and every picture had to be perfect. But then there was also, if you remember it, there was that Polaroid instant film. You remember that? You'd have like a little shoebox that you'd put this Polaroid slide film in with like a little box of chemicals, and it'd come out in like 3 minutes, and it'd be like these really sort of scratched, grainy instant Polaroid film 35mm slides. But everyone sort of loved it because it was, again, even in the 80s, everything was becoming super slick. And photographers, as much as we make things look perfect, people love black and white images. That's missing all the color. People do think that things that are more arty have more artifacts, if that is. So this image was probably one of the last images that I did. This was when I was in Manchester. I was in a building with, you call it a co-working space now. Again, everyone thinks it's a new idea. This is in the 90s in Manchester. And that was, you all had your little office, and there was a communal cafe and stuff. So lots of people in spiral carpets, James, Sunset Radio was on the top. This is back in the days when Noel Gallagher was dating a receptionist there, and he was a roadie for the spiral carpets. And I was probably, this is the other thing. This is really like, I'm like a super geek here, really, doing this geeky stuff. But anyway, so the designer, Christopher Lord, who I'm still trying to track down, and I can't. He asked me, he said, "Oh, James are doing a new album. It's going to be called Gold Mother. Do you want to come up with an idea for the paint box?" And we'll do that. So that image on the left, it's got more nuance on the image, but basically, I just got I went to a library and got an engraving, a photocopy of an engraving of Leonardo da Vinci, Madonna and Child, and reflected it in some tin foil and then just hand colored it gold. It was as simple as that. But and then the one on the back is annoying because I lost the postcard. I had it for ages. That was just a weird Victorian postcard that had like a letter C on it, and a corner of it had this cherub that I thought, well, it's like a baby. So that was the back, again, just reflected. But again, that was using some, at the time, if you remember the late 90s, Terminator 2 came out with liquid metal, etc. And you couldn't, unless you were in Hollywood, you couldn't do that effect. And I remember doing this image in a post-production company, and people were like, how the hell did you do that? Like, well, software just didn't tell them, because everything you put into the paint box, you had what you call a rostrum camera, which is just a camera with on a stand down with a couple of lights, and you put everything under it. So I would use things like tin foil, and as I said before, there's plastic sheets to do some of the distortion, and then the paint box do a bit more, really. So that's probably one of my more famous things, just because a band used it. But it's a shame it wasn't. I'd be more famous if it was Oasis, but he didn't like me and I didn't like him, so there you go. It was James. This was a really early image that, this is 86. Again, so I'm trying to give some kind of thanks to Quantel and Fuji. You see the kind of split box. It's using that same effect as the split head. But what I'm trying to do in that image, there's lots of things, obviously, to the eyeball. There was no such Quantel is short for quantized television, and quantized means basically like digitized. But there was no definition of it, so I was using some definitions out of a dictionary, which was, trying to explain to people what it was. Then that is a screen, basically it was a pile of pencils. If you pan back at it, you see that those are pencils that I obviously put under the video camera, grabbed, you know, I'd have like a fist of them all together, and then colored each one. But then if you pan back even more, I overlaid it onto a woman's face. So, and then on the right, you'll see there's a map, I think maybe of Newbury. I think that might be a map of Newbury. And then there's Wellington there. I think that's Wellington. Is that Wellington or Nelson? It used to be on the £5 note.
I have no idea. Looks like
you're too young. So those basically all of that, what I was trying to convey was that is a visual representation of the one that says new photography. Because that basically, that crack and that break is everything just really coming apart because of all the things. So you've got conventional drawing on the left of a portrait. You've got the Quantel thing being about digitization. You've got the film, the Fuji film box, literally ripped in half. The eye, which is kind of overlooking everything, but it's all, you know, breaking up. I know it's a weird thing, but it literally, to me, that's the visualization of the breakup of traditional photography and art into digital, which, you know, sounds like, you know, very very arty and very deep, but that's really what I was trying to show there. And if you look at the elements, it's kind of, as I describe it, you can kind of see what I was trying to convey. But yeah, lots of different elements in there. What do you think of that one, Aaron? Did you realise that was what I was trying to say?
I think so. I've not really thought about this one in particular.
Why do you like that one, for instance?
I think it's just the combination of objects within the whole thing. It's that whole montage. So rather than just being a singular image that has been tweaked or manipulated, I think it's the fact you've put many objects into this shot.
Well, and so that's the other thing. As much as that woman, I've got an idea that woman who's where the pencils is could be the same woman. Is that the same woman as wearing the hood? You think that's the same woman? Or like just a section of it? Maybe not.
Possibly. It's really hard to make her out.
Yeah. So the thing is, ultimately, what I have got that got taught in college and through practice, etc., was compositional skills and color skills. You know, we'd be told as photographers, go off and find, you know, come back with a roll of 36 images that everything's blue, or everything's got like a smooth and a rough texture next to each other, or whatever. Those were the exercises we did as photographers, and that was all transferred into this. This is what I mean. So the Quantel Paintbox was shared between the photography students, the graphic design students, and graphics in those days wasn't just typography or design. You know, you'd have to do different things. And then there was a thing called a technical illustration course, which was, in the old days, you know, they would do cutouts of engines and airbrush illustrations of Marilyn Monroe and all that kind of stuff. So everyone would use those, but if you had a graphic designer who used the Paintbox, he really wouldn't have done what I would do as a photographer. But, and I'm not saying I'm better or anything, but I was using it as a visual machine, not a graphics machine. I mean, the thing that the Quantel Paintbox was designed for originally was because literally if you had a TV station, you had to do titles for the news, you had to do captions for some, you know, the war in wherever, weather maps, all that kind of stuff. It was basically like a business machine to save the graphic design department of having to like stick Letraset down and make cutouts and do, you know, a drum roll with like all the titles on. You could just instantly do it digitally. Now it had all this creative aspect to it, so you could make all that look cool, But generally, the Paintbox would have been used where that image, which again is TV screen format, you could imagine it would say, you know, Margaret Thatcher elected, and then on the right there'd be like, you know, a picture of the Houses of Parliament and, you know, the date or something. That's what it was designed for. That a graphic design person in a TV company would have done it, would have used it for. Later it was used for post-production, like doing, you know, cool TV commercials and things like that. But it wouldn't be really used as a photo montage tool or to create photographs because, again, it, you know, wasn't good enough quality. So yeah, again, just coincidentally or timing-wise or whatever, it's another of the attributes that I had, and timing, etc., that meant why this all fell into place. It wasn't any genius thing. It was just a load of different things all just coming together.
Okay, Adrian, I'm conscious of time a little bit, so shall we just skip a couple and maybe concentrate on this one? And
oh yeah, everyone loves that one. So that, for instance, that would have been 87 or something. So at the time, Factory Records, probably people know Joy Division, all that kind of stuff, was the big place, and they had a nightclub called the Hacienda. And really, it was the coolest thing in Manchester to do, to be involved with Factory Records. So that image was really a pitch image to the boss, Tony Wilson, who obviously shares my surname, but not much else. He's way more talented than I was. And literally, again, you know, if you had this full-color, real-time computer, but, well, you just make this green image. I mean, it seems strange, really, but that's what it required. It's what I wanted as a green image. And yeah, I got you know, the image that's there of the woman and overlaid it. I remember I had a dogtooth jacket at the time, so I'm pretty sure that background is a dogtooth texture of fabric, and then put the graphics over. But yeah, still a very striking image. But as I say, I mean, okay, green is maybe, you know, the picture of original when you had your TV, when you had your personal computer, it was that green glowing screen, and I think I probably was trying to emulate that. The other thing I should explain is that the Paintbox and the originals, and this is no criticism of the prints, but ultimately there are two kinds of ways of seeing an image. There's reflected light, which is what you're looking at now, and is why you can see there's kind of flare at the top. It's not black because the light is being reflected off the surface to give the image. And then there's the video of that you're looking at on the screen of your phone now, which is transmitted color. Now, you can't ever get the saturation and vividness, if that's a word, of transmitted color by any kind of print. So this was the other cool thing. It was basically, and I'd love to see this on these images on giant video screens. And as I say, this isn't any criticism of you, but they really did pop like amazingly. And so again, you know, technology means that if you see, you know, if I got that image and I've scanned it and boosted it and posted it online, you kind of get that impression of what it was to look like on an original TV screen. Which again, that's why in the 80s there was so many of these bright pastel color images, because this Paintbox had these colors that were so vibrant. It had a mixing palette, and some of the colors, they're just so 80s because, and you can imagine when people saw them, you know, from a flat yellow weather map to seeing this bright yellow sun and, you know, vivid colors. It was literally like a revelation. So that's why lots of the 80s was so full of all those colors on TV anyway, and MTV, etc., is because of the Paintbox. Okay, so we can skip that. The Fuji one, well, that was another one that was done on the graphic Paintbox. That was for an article. So that was, you know, I was writing articles on computer graphics, on computer art in 1988. 1987, people were featuring my work. So that's the other thing. I've got all this background stuff where I'm not just doing this in isolation. I was, you know, actually there was part of a community, and and it was seen at the time. I was recognized. That spiral one's one of my favorite. That was really hard to do, but I mean, that looks really modern to me. But that's a film strip with these images in and revolved around and scraped along and whatever. And to me, there's just something really, there's no way you could do that image photographically. I mean, you could do, in theory, sorry to contradict myself, you could do in some way by doing repeat exposures, etc., and stepping it and things. But to do that on the Paintbox, and I'm sure that did take me a while because it's not a straightforward image to produce. But, you know, the motion and everything. So if you look at the last one we were talking about, the Hacienda one, where I wanted it to be green, and it's flat color, then the one next to it, which is very true to life colors, and then the one next to that we're just looking at, yeah, unfortunately I've only got a print off of that from a magazine, that's why you got that screen. To then that one, again, it's not like I'm, even though they vary a lot, these images, they are consistent, they do hold together as a collection. And even though that was, you could say, well, that's a computer gimmick to do that. There wasn't a button on the Paintbox that created that effect. That takes a lot of time to plan, etc. So I wasn't just getting a new, you know, Instagram filter or getting a new, what do they call those things? Where they put the rabbit ears on your head and stuff. I wasn't a slave to the technology. I made the technology do what I wanted it to do for my imagination. So. And then if you look at the next one, the next image, this was a commission from Curator Review about the director John Lasseter. So they gave me the article, and it was John Lasseter directed Midnight Cowboy, which is obviously an amazing movie. And he was talking about Hollywood being terrible, about money and commodities, and just so. Even though it was going to be a color print, they didn't say it's going to be black and white. I don't think. Obviously, that's a picture that I grabbed of Colin and all this broken up stuff, and I created a black. Why would you do a black and white image on a full color graphics computer that cost $250,000? It doesn't make sense unless what you wanted to show was a black and white image, and you weren't a slave to the computer. The computer was doing what you wanted it to do. So again, that was something that was in the 1988 Art and Computers show, which is such, again, for a commercial image. The other one was truly artistic. So again, I'm not blowing my own trumpet, but as a collection, it's interesting to sort of think how my brain was working and the choices I made. Even though I had all these options ahead, I was still quite in control of the technology. How are we doing on time? Oh, your sound's gone there. I can't hear you. Have you muted yourself? I know I talk a lot, but...
I have. You think I've been good at sorting that out by now. I think Instagram's about to kick us off. It says an hour, but I'm never entirely sure.
Oh, does it? Well, just quickly go to the display case, and then we can, on the left...
We'll see what happens.
Yeah. Oh, it kicked us off. Oh, no, you're back on. Okay, so the other cool thing is, again, thanks to my mum and, just to collected all this stuff, I have the original brochure for the Paintbox with my image on the front. I have the invitation to the show in 1988, to the gallery show. So I have all that kind of what they call ephemera or whatever. Which is really cool to still have that to go with the collection. There's obviously the original Gold Mother album, and then below that is the original postcard that I used. So that brown one's the original postcard, and then the print off it. And then if you quickly go to the other thing, oh, and there's me. There's a portrait of me taken by Ian Tilton. Because again, it's kind of weird. I wasn't say famous, but I was documented by a rock photographer for magazines and stuff about what work I was doing, etc. I mean, look at that hair, amazing. Yeah, there's me using the image as a promo for a New York magazine. And then if you go to the other thing before